Do your license registration insurance card? What's that?
I got my license, but my neighbors.
Okay, let's start with your license. The reason for the stop is your third brake light's out.
Oh, okay.
It starts like any other drive. Headlights on, an empty road, nothing unusual. But seconds later, the dash cam captures something so unsettling that even investigators struggled to explain it. Across 4 layers of terror, these are the most disturbing moments ever caught on dash cam. Layer 1. Motorcyclist jailed due to causing a head-on collision. It was 5:45 p.m. on Thursday, March 9, 2023, when Catherine Goff, a 52-year-old rider from Exeter, began making her way along the A3052. It was a route she knew well, but that evening the weather had made navigating the road difficult. Mist hovered low over the tarmac, and heavy rain swept across the headlights of every vehicle. Catherine was riding her Kawasaki, following a RAC van that had been called out to recover her partner's vehicle. For a while, she stayed tucked behind it. Every few seconds, she lifted one hand from the handlebars and swiped at her visor, trying to clear the sheets of water sliding across. But the moment she wiped it clean, another wave of droplets blurred her view all over again. At one point, she seemed to be riding almost blind. The traffic moved steadily but slowly. Catherine, however, grew tired of the pace. After several minutes, she eased on the throttle, her engine rising above the steady hum of the vehicles around her. Then, in one decisive moment, she pulled out from behind the RAC van and crossed onto the opposite side of the road, attempting an overtake. As she moved alongside the van, the headlight of an oncoming motorcycle appeared through the mist, approaching fast. There was a split second when Catherine could have backed off or slowed down. Instead, she continued her maneuver, seemingly unaware of how quickly danger was closing in. The two bikes collided. The impact was powerful enough to bring both motorcycles down violently. Drivers rushed from their vehicles, calling for help as rain continued to fall over the scattered wreckage. The incoming rider had sustained severe leg injuries so critical that doctors later had no choice but to amputate. Police investigators from the Serious Collisions Investigation Team pieced together what happened. The dashcam footage, road markings, and witness accounts all led to the same conclusion. The collision was entirely avoidable. Catherine's decision to overtake in terrible weather conditions, especially when she could barely see, fell far below the standard expected of a safe road user. Catherine appeared at Exeter Crown Court on Friday, 25 April. She pleaded guilty to causing serious injury by dangerous driving. The court acknowledged her remorse, but the consequences of her actions were too significant to ignore. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison and disqualified from driving for 4 years. The A3052 returned to its usual rhythm, but for the two riders whose path crossed in the rain, life would never return to the way it had been before.
What the? Oh my God!
Car insurance scam caught on dash cam. The morning sun had barely risen over Queens, New York, when traffic began building along the Belt Parkway. For Ashpia Natasha, it was supposed to be her usual morning journey, nothing on her mind except getting through the rush. But a few miles into her drive, everything changed. Up ahead, a silver car began acting strangely. It drifted, slowed, then pulled directly in front of her. Before Natasha could make sense of it, the car abruptly stopped. Then, shockingly, the silver vehicle reversed, bumping into her SUV. Startled, Natasha wondered whether she had stumbled into some sort of road rage incident. But the strangeness didn't end there. As the car stopped, the occupants of the Honda lifted what looked like a plastic tarp inside the rear window, stretching it across the back of the vehicle, blocking Natasha's view of what was happening inside. It was such an unusual move that it immediately raised her suspicions. Behind the partially covered window, shadows shifted. The people inside the Honda were changing seats. Only after the switch was made did a red Kia appear on the highway and stop in front of the Honda. One of the men from the Honda stepped out, walked casually to the Kia, and entered inside as though he had been waiting for this precise moment. When the group finally approached Natasha, they were in a hurry. They exchanged information quickly, barely making eye contact. They insisted they had to leave because they needed to pick up their baby. The entire interaction felt rehearsed and rushed. Natasha reported the incident, and when investigators watched the footage from her cameras, the events became clear. It wasn't an accident. It was a sign of a coordinated insurance scam. Days later, investigators identified 28-year-old Michael Martinez as one of the individuals involved. Martinez was arraigned on charges including staging a motor vehicle accident, conspiracy, reckless endangerment, and insurance fraud. He appeared in court, pleaded not guilty, and is required to return on January 7, 2025. If convicted, he faces up to 2.5 LFT7 and years in prison. Pedestrian struck and injured by Cruise robo-taxi. It was just another busy evening in downtown San Francisco, the streets alive with cars, cyclists, and pedestrians. But at one chaotic intersection, a single step by a pedestrian turned the routine flow of traffic into a moment of horror. As the traffic light flipped from red to green, a car shot forward and struck a pedestrian crossing the street, lifting her onto its hood for only a minute before flinging her back down the road. Before anyone could react, she slid directly into the path of an approaching Cruise robo-taxi, moving autonomously through the intersection. The driver sped away, disappearing into the night. The driverless Cruise vehicle, however, jolted to a stop the moment it detected the impact. The company quickly shared the short clip with reporters the following morning, insisting that the car had braked aggressively to minimize the impact. But it didn't. San Francisco officials began an investigation and learned that first responders at the scene had noticed something the short video didn't show. The robo-taxi had not stopped where the collision occurred. There was a clear trail leading nearly 20 feet farther down the road. This marked the path the pedestrian had been pulled along before the vehicle finally came to rest. The longer video was revealed to the DMV only after another agency disclosed its existence. After the initial braking, the autonomous system misinterpreted the collision as a side impact rather than a frontal one. Following its programmed safety protocol, it attempted to pull over to the curb, even though the pedestrian was still trapped underneath. Cruise disputed the DMV's interpretation, insisting that it had cooperated with investigators and shared information proactively. The company said its engineers were already examining how to prevent such errors in the future. But for California regulators, the issue was larger than a technical glitch. It was about public trust and transparency. The DMV revoked Cruise's permit to operate driverless vehicles, citing that the company's autonomous systems were not safe for the public's operation. Tesla driver terrorized by swerving truck. On October 18, 2024, in Ontario, Rajan Singh expected nothing more than a normal drive. Tristander dove steadily along the winding roads, the dashcam quietly recording everything. Up ahead, a pickup truck drifted into view. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but in seconds, the driver's behavior shifted sharply. The car lurched into Singh's lane, forcing him to brake hard. Singh tried to create distance, easing off and switching lanes, hoping the moment had simply been a mistake. But it wasn't. The pickup slowed deliberately, then swerved again, blocking the Singh a second time. This time, the pickup truck driver struck their window, gesturing angrily as though Singh were responsible for the chaos. Confused and increasingly alarmed, Singh tried once more to put space between them, but the pickup driver seemed determined to escalate the situation. What began as reckless driving quickly tipped into something far more dangerous. The truck swung violently across lanes, weaving back and forth like a predator stalking its target. That was when the first real moment of fear hit. Singh grabbed his phone, dialed 911, and kept his eyes on the road. All the while, Singh narrated the unfolding chaos to the dispatcher, the Tesla's dash cam capturing every second. His voice trembled but remained focused as he described the truck, the license plate, and the exact location of each dangerous maneuver. Eventually, the pickup sped off down an exit ramp, disappearing before police arrived. But the dash cam and the live 911 recording provided investigators with vital evidence. After the terrifying encounter, Jashanpreet Singh, a commercial truck driver, was taken into custody in California, following a devastating 8-vehicle crash on a separate date. Layer 2. Cop runs over victim, Trina Jones. It was late on the night of September 23rd in Virginia when the first call came in. An emergency report of a woman struck by a black Mercedes while crossing an intersection. The victim, a 62-year-old, lay injured on the ground as concerned strangers rushed to help her. Despite the shock and pain, she was still conscious, able to speak and trying to stay calm. For a moment, it appeared that the worst was over and help would arrive soon. Across Fairfax County, Officer Phillips sped toward the scene. His dash cam captured everything. As he approached, the driver, who had been shielding Trina, slowly pulled his car forward to make room for the incoming cruiser. The dash cam video showed Phillips's cruiser slowing but not stopping soon enough. The bird shape of Trina on the ground disappeared from view just before the hit. He rushed down, his stunned voice breaking the silence. "Please do not tell me I just ran over her." Fairfax Fire and Rescue rushed in, performing urgent life-saving measures. But despite their efforts, Trina was later pronounced dead at the hospital. In the days that followed, the incident weighed heavily on the community and the department alike. Investigators reviewed the cruiser's speed between 14 and 17 miles per hour and examined the dash cam footage frame by frame. The department confirmed that they had located the Mercedes involved in the initial hit and run, but the driver had yet to be found. Meanwhile, Officer Phillips was placed on restrictive duty status while the investigation continued. As of now, he has not been charged with any crime. Ghost sighting on Arizona highway. The desert highways outside Phoenix are among the longest, darkest roads in Arizona. In the early hours of March 17, 2023, Williams Church was driving along Route 87, his car slicing through the empty darkness at 2:30 a.m. The road ahead was silent. No headlights, just the desert wind and the faint hum of his tires. Church had a Nexar dash cam mounted on his windshield, mostly out of habit. He never expected it to record anything unusual. But on that night, his camera captured something he couldn't explain. As his car rounded a gentle bend on the highway, a sudden burst of light flared on the right side of the road, so bright, transparent, and human-like. It instantly jolted him upright in his seat. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Church slowed his car and scanned the roadside, expecting to find something. But the highway was empty ahead under the moonlight. There were no other cars, no houses, no street lamps that could explain what he had seen. Later, when he reviewed the footage, the strangeness only deepened. To this day, no official explanation has been confirmed. Some call it a ghost. Others suggest desert mirages, reflections, or even a trick of the atmosphere. Wherever the truth is, the footage remains, a single flash of light on a lonely Arizona highway, a moment caught by chance, and a mystery that appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Layer 3. 2 men killed in a horror crash on the Sydney Harbor Bridge. The Sydney Harbor Bridge was carrying its usual afternoon mix of commuters, tourists, and delivery traffic when, without warning, a typical day dissolved into a tragedy that would stun the city. It happened at 1:35 p.m. The sun was high, and the lanes were packed but flowing smoothly. Among the vehicles traveling southbound was a blue hatchback, captured on multiple dash cams as it drove along the bridge. For a few seconds, everything looked routine. Suddenly, the hatchback crossed the lane markings, drifting toward the incoming cars. Drivers in the opposite lanes barely had time to react. Several cars honked. A few tried to slow down and edge away, but the hatchback continued cutting entirely across the divvy entirland into the path of vehicles traveling northbound. A white Hyundai was the first in its direction. In seconds, the two vehicles collided head-on. The impact pushed both cars backward, disrupting traffic. Before the momentum could settle, the blue hatchback spun towards another lane and collided with a bus. In the span of seconds, what had been smooth traffic turned into a scene of confusion and panic. Emergency calls poured in, reporting a serious multi-vehicle collision. When authorities arrived, they found a devastating pileup of 4 cars and a bus tangled across the lanes. Paramedics discovered 2 drivers who had taken the brunt of the crash. Despite desperate efforts to revive them, both men were pronounced dead at the scene. The bridge was shut down for hours as investigators worked to understand exactly what happened. With so many cars involved and the cause still unclear, detectives issued a public plea for dashcam footage that might help them piece together the moments leading up to the crash. By the evening, the bridge had partially reopened, but the weight of the day lingered. APD cruiser kills skateboarder Gerardo Estrada. The carnival lights glowed brightly along Figueroa Street that evening. Music, laughter, and the voices of crowds filling the warm Los Angeles night. Just a few blocks away, 30-year-old Gerardo Estrada was skateboarding home from work, gliding toward the center median. At 7:15 p.m., an urgent police call went out. LAPD officers had been dispatched to help establish a perimeter where a suspect with a felony warrant was being sought. Officer Matthew Gutierrez switched on his emergency lights and siren and accelerated northbound on Figueroa Street. Dashcam captures the urgency of the moment. With sirens echoing in the background, the police cruiser weaved through traffic, sometimes crossing into the wrong lane to get around cars stacked at red lights. Streetlights flashed across the windshield as the vehicle moved toward the center median, still speeding toward the intersection ahead. Up ahead, Gerardo Estrada appeared in front of the cruiser, standing in the center median with his skateboard. In a split-second reaction, he jumped off it and raised both hands, startled by the incoming cruiser moving towards him. There was no time for him to move. The impact happened almost immediately. The cruiser swerved left and finally came to a stop near the median directly outside the carnival, where dozens of people witnessed the crash. Bodycam footage on one of the officers showed bystanders shouting in fear and anger. The officers ran from the vehicle, searching frantically until they found Estrada pinned beneath a nearby parked car. They pulled him out and attempted first aid as flashing carnival lights up the chaotic scene. Firefighters arrived shortly afterward, but despite all efforts, Gerardo Estrada was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation is ongoing, and both officers' identities remain withheld. 1 dead, 1 injured in Shelby County pursuit crash. November 12, 2025 began like any other day along Route 47. But shortly after 4 p.m., a routine alert broke the calm. A flock safety license plate, 2021 Dodge Durango, moving west through the city. The SUV wasn't just any vehicle. It carried multiple active warrants and was tied to an armed burglary that had shaken Centerville months earlier. The Ohio State Highway Patrol quickly notified Sydney police, and units began scanning the area. It didn't take long. At a Clerk's gas station, officers spotted the Durango parked by the pumps. Behind the wheel was 25-year-old Trishawn L. Clemens of Kettering. In the passenger seat sat 19-year-old Aaliyah Davis. Both had open felony warrants connected to an armed robbery. Before officers could even step out of their cruisers, Clemens looked up, saw them approaching, and made his choice. The car drove out of the parking lot, tires screeching, and swung west onto the roadway. The pursuit began instantly. Sydney officers followed as Clemens sped through the outskirts of town and onto county roads that cut through Shelby County's stretches. What started as a standard traffic stop quickly spiraled into a high-speed chase. the driver surged to 100 miles per hour, then 110, then nearly 120 miles per hour as it thundered down narrow roads meant for farm trucks and local drivers. The patrol dash cams captured every second. For more than 5 minutes, the chase zigzagged across multiple back roads, dust trailing behind the Durango as it streaked past open fields and tree lines. Officers radioed ahead, working to coordinate a safe end to the pursuit, but Clemens was determined not to stop. As the chase reached an intersection, the terrain changed. The pavement there was uneven, which drivers usually slowed for. But at extreme speeds, those minor imperfections became dangerous. The Durango hit a rough patch in the road, bouncing sharply, and Clemens lost control. The SUV veered deep into a roadside ditch and flipped multiple times before coming to a stop. Officers reached the crash site seconds later, rushing towards Clemens and his passenger. They attempted life-saving aid, but the impact was severe. Clemens was pronounced dead at the scene. Aaliyah, on the other hand, was rushed to the hospital. Her condition remained uncertain in the days that followed. Layer 4. 5 dead, 12 injured in N3 taxi crash near Marion Hill. Late on a Friday afternoon, the usual bush stretch of the N3 near Marion Hill Toll Plaza fell silent as Tracy occurred. It was just after 5:30 when a minibus taxi carrying 17 passengers veered off the road. The taxi was heading towards Ixopo when the driver suddenly swerved to avoid a reckless polo driver. In that split second, the driver lost control and the vehicle descended the slope. Truck drivers traveling behind watched the horror happen. Several rushed to alert Road Traffic Inspectorate, RTI officials, who had already deployed nearby officers in the area after a multidisciplinary roadblock earlier in the day. When ALS paramedics arrived, the scene was chaotic. The taxi lay battered on its side on the steep incline, and emergency personnel had to work carefully to reach the injured. Video footage shared by ALS paramedics showed medics climbing the slope, carrying equipment, and fighting against the terrain as they treated victims on the hillside. By the time the operation was stabilized, the full devastation had become visible. 5 people died in the crash. 13 others were injured. Paramedics worked tirelessly to stabilize the survivors before transporting them to RK Khan Hospital, where doctors continued to fight to save those critically injured. Meanwhile, the accident had triggered a full investigation. RTI officials, Durban Metro Police, SAPS, and the Road Traffic Management Corporation have begun reconstructing the crash, piecing together witnesses' statements and physical evidence to determine precisely what happened in those fateful seconds on the N3. Walter Scott, shooting dash cam. On the morning of April 4, 2015, sometime around 9:30 a.m., Walter Lamer Scott, a 50-year-old Coast Guard veteran, was driving his 1991 Mercedes. He was heading towards an auto parts store on Remount Road. But on that same road, Officer Michael Slager of the North Charleston Police Department noticed something. The Mercedes' third brake light wasn't working. Slager pulled the car over in the parking lot of an auto parts store at 1945 Remount Road. His patrol car Dashcam captured Slager as he approached Scott's window. He spoke with him, took his license, then returned briefly to his patrol car. Nothing in those early moments suggested what was about to unfold. Then Scott suddenly opened his door, stepped out, and ran. Slager immediately started chasing. The 2 men disappeared from the dashcam view, sprinting across Remount Road and into a lot behind a pawn shop at 5654 Rivers Avenue. There, out of the dashcam's range, a confrontation took place. During the struggle, Slager deployed his taser, firing it at Scott. Scott broke free and started running again, trying to put distance between himself and the officer. Slager drew his .45 caliber Glock 21 and fired 8 shots as Scott fled. A bystander, Fiden Santana, walking to work, had quietly begun recording the incident with his cell phone. His video eventually contradicted major parts of the police reports. After the shots were fired, Slanger radioed into dispatch. "Shots fired and the subject is down. He grabbed my taser." But Santana's video showed Scott running away when the shots were fired. It also showed something else. After handcuffing Scott, Slanger walked back to the area where the incident occurred, picked up the taser, and dropped it near Scott's hand. Santana's video exploded across national news, and within days, the North Charleston Police Department reviewed the footage. On April 7th, Officer Slager was arrested and charged with murder. He was fired from the department the next day. The case shockwave spread beyond Charleston. The protests grew. The shooting became entwined with national conversations about race and policing. A South Carolina body camera bill was renamed in Walter Scott's honor, and lawmakers allocated $3.4 million to equip officers across the state. The coroner ruled the death a homicide. A grand jury indicted Slager on murder charges on June 8, 2015. Slager awaited trial for months under house arrest. His first murder trial ended in a mistrial in December 2016 when the jury deadlocked. A retrial was planned, but everything changed when federal prosecutors filed new charges. In May 2017, Slager entered a plea agreement admitting guilt to violating Walter Scott's civil rights. In exchange, the murder charges and federal charges were dropped. On December 7, 2017, Slager was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The judge ruled the underlying crime aligned with second-degree murder, rejecting the defense's argument for manslaughter. With no federal parole system, Slager is expected to serve nearly the full sentence, with his earliest possible release date currently set for August 16, 2032. He later filed an appeal seeking a reduction in his sentence, but it was denied. If you thought this was chilling, wait until you see our breakdown of the most disturbing Thanksgiving events ever recorded. Head over to the channel and check it out. I'll see you there.